I'm Stuart Garlick. My Twitter is, well, at Stuart Garlick, Stuart, STUARTGARLICK, and also I write for eMotion Formula E, which is my own site on Medium. You can find it medium.com/e-motion, and also at emotion_FE on Twitter. I'd be very happy to see you if you want to follow me. Yes, it's the E-Talking Podcast 11th edition, and we're wrapping up the Formula E Season 5 and also looking forward to Season 6, and maybe hopefully getting a few personal and professional anecdotes from some of the people we've got on the call. So, looking round the virtual sitting room, I've got Conrad O'Keefe from eracing.net. I've got Toby Bloom from eformal.de. I've got Alan Robson, the Scottish EV owner, advocate of electric cars, and also a huge Formula E fan who's been to some races, and you can find him on Twitter and YouTube. Amelia Hilder, who is the features editor of eracing.net. Hope I got that right, Amelia?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All the way from Kuala Lumpur, so it's in the middle of the night there. And also, lastly but not leastly, Jonty Beard, co-star of the F1 Word and Formula E Word podcasts. Jonty, you're probably the one with the most YouTube views out of any of us, so massive pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's good to spread out and do something else.
Yeah. So, I think we've all seen every race of the Formula E season. Some of us have been to some races, some of us have been to one or two. So, I've got some topics to discuss. Let's start with the best race to watch on TV, and also the best race to attend in person. So, let's go round. Let's start with Toby on this one. Which do you think was the best race to watch, and which one was the best one to attend?
Oh, I might be biased and say the best race to attend was Berlin. Me being German, of course, that's simple. But I feel like Berlin did have a decent show and a decent program around the race. So I'll say Berlin was a good race to attend. Of course, I haven't been to many of the other races. I've been to Morocco this year and Rome, apart from Berlin. But out of those, I feel like the Berlin race was the best. Watching on telly is a bit more difficult. Usually, of course, we're always working the races, and the only race I could actually enjoy without having to write about it was Hong Kong, because I was on holiday back then. And got up early on Sunday morning, was it, in Europe, or Saturday morning? Not sure. Early morning in Sweden, somewhere in the outskirts of Stockholm, and I watched that race. And for the only reason being that I could enjoy the race without having to work, I'll say the best race to watch on TV was Hong Kong. And from an action point of view, surely Paris was the best race to watch on TV.
I've often wondered how it is, and I'll come to you, Conrad, with this one next. We're still talking about the best race to watch, whether you're attending or watching remotely. But I've often wondered whether actually having to cover the race means that you watch the race differently. I mean, what's your opinion, Conrad?
I've had to report on virtually every race. I think there was only one that I missed, and that's because I was on a lengthy train ride. That was Monaco, and I think you see it in a different light. Lets you focus on more things more at the time, because you're not trying to look away and write some words down on a piece of paper or online. But at the same time, that might just be my personal experience of kind of getting to grips with handling both at the same time.
And what was your favourite race
I've definitely enjoyed them. I'd say I saw the highlights of New York Race 1, although I didn't see that live. That's my favourite. But the favourite one that I did see live was probably Paris.
Oh, right. So you went to Paris. Okay. Because Sophie, who was meant to be on this call, also went to Paris.
No. I meant like watched live rather than watched highlights. Yeah. I'm hoping to go there next season.
Okay. Yeah, well, by all accounts, it was quite a chaotic crowd situation, but she enjoyed the race even though it rained really hard. Would you say as well, and I'll pass over to Alan for this one. Would you say watching the wet races made them more exciting, or was one of your favourites a dry race, Alan?
Well, my favourite one was Mexico because it had everything, especially with the finish with Berlijn and Degrassi. It's one of those times when you can just stand up and shout at the TV. There was just so much happening, especially with the battery management. That's obviously a big part of the Gen 2 car, up in altitude and a very hot racetrack. I quite enjoyed that one.
Okay, good. And how about you, John T? So, what was your favourite race from a spectator point of view, and did you manage to go to any of them live?
Sadly, I didn't get to go to any live for season 5, but I certainly will be for season 6. Hopefully Berlin, but definitely London. However, on watching as a spectator on TV, it's kind of a toss-up because I agree with Alan that Mexico had a bit of everything, and that last lap was just absolute chaos, and watching it was just, like I say, jumping out of the sofa. The cat went one way, the coffee went the other. But Bern, I must admit, I actually missed some of the action in Bern because I was too busy looking at all of the scenery and the wonderful city that they have there, wondering, oh, that would be a nice house. So as a spectator, it does make it very entertaining to watch when there's also a spectacular backdrop for the racing to be going on. But there's another race that had a lot of stuff going on track, with it going from dry to wet. No one knew what was going to happen.
But Bern is a spectacular place. It's also probably going to be the last time I think Formula E goes to such a relatively small town. I know it's a capital city, but in Switzerland's a small country itself. It seemed almost like it was a throwback, because I don't think Formula E will now in a way bother to go to places so small and such a mission to get to for so many people, where they also have protests. Who was actually there? Toby, you were there.
I totally forgot that. I didn't mention it earlier. I totally forgot about me being in Switzerland.
and you covered the protests. So I felt the journalist clique within Formula E was almost split down the middle on the protests. Some people said it's nothing to worry about, it's just people wanting the ban on motor racing to be brought back, and then other people said actually, this has happened before with Formula E. Did you think it was significant, the protest in Bern?
It seemed significant on the Friday, but didn't on the Saturday, because you have to keep in mind that there were around 1,000 people involved in protesting and doing that bike ride across the road and around the circuit. And they, of course, tore away the banners and major damages. I think 400,000 Swiss francs in damages. But on the other hand, you had, I think, over 100,000 visitors for the race. Of course, the Swiss count it a bit differently. They count anyone entering the E-Village as a visitor of Formula E, so you have to take that with a pinch of salt. But the numbers, they just don't correlate. You had a lot of people there on Saturday. So as I said, on Friday, the protests seemed significant, but if you look at who was there and how many people were there on the Saturday, the protesters were clearly in the minority.
I'm thinking, Amelia, that probably because of your geographical location, you've been to some of the races that none of the rest of us have. So which of the races did you actually manage to attend as a reporter, and did you go to any as a fan? And which race was your favourite to either spectate at or to watch on TV?
This season, I actually went to just 2 races. So it was Hong Kong and Monaco. I have to say the best best race to attend is probably Hong Kong for me because it's nearby and I don't get so jet lagged. Of course, Monaco is another best place to attend, I guess, because you just can't really go wrong with Monaco.
And of course, being a proper magazine journalist, you have actually got an article, a travel article about Monaco in, what's the magazine?
Oh, yes, Unreserved magazine. So it's a Southeast Asian-based lifestyle and current affairs magazine. So, yeah, my editor said, oh, since you're going, you might as well just write a travel article out of it.
Superb. And I hope that I'll be able to get hold of a copy, because that would be fascinating. I assume it's in English.
Yes, it's in English. I could mail you a copy if you want.
That would be lovely. I'll have to pay the postage. We'll sort that out after the podcast for sure. But yeah, carry on. So, did any of the other races catch your eye? Maybe any of the ones you watched on TV, for example.
I really like the Berlin race actually, and I feel like Mexico is really nice to watch. I've never been. I think it's just that stadium part. It makes it look more, I don't know, legit. And,
there are plenty of people who feel exactly the same way. I must admit, I'm split on the city street circuit thing, because for me, Formula E began on city street circuits because because of the cars and because of the speed of the cars and the fact you can make any car look fast on the city street circuit. I think for me, the fact that they're not going to quote unquote proper tracks out in the countryside, it's not necessarily because the cars couldn't cope with it. It's more because of the fossil fuel spent getting there for spectators, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But I quite like the street circuits as well, and it's when you race on city circuits, then for like us journalists, it's quite easier to get there rather than a circuit in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I expect that I only went to Silverstone as a spectator, but I would expect that every British journalist has a Silverstone war story from the car parks, I would imagine. Yeah. All right. So we come on to our next question. Stars of the season. So this is the breakthrough driver, the future superstar, and also the flop of the season. So who do we think did especially well? Who's one to watch? And who can we say absolutely bombed and maybe won't be back next season? Let's go backwards this time. Let's start with Amelia.
Star of the season, I guess Mitch Evans. I think he did quite well. I think it was definitely his best season so far. What else was there? Future superstar, breakthrough.
Yeah, so the breakthrough driver, the future. Yeah. So sorry, the star of the season, future superstar, and the flop of the season. 3.
Okay, star of the season, Mitch Evans. Future superstar, I'd say maybe Max Gunter. And I don't know about flop of the season, but maybe one of the Neo boys. I was expecting them to do a bit better, but nothing outstanding, I think.
Yeah, there's actually there's actually a little bit of news about Neo. I was reading eRacing 365, and supposedly they may have been quietly looking for investment, but and they may have spoken to Bobby Rahal about taking over the team, but he's decided against it. So looks like the team will stay the same for next season, but maybe they're looking to get a few sponsors on board, and they've already got the new powertrain out testing. So can you see, Amelia, any hope in Neo improving next season?
I don't know. Maybe. Well, you never know, actually. You can't really predict. Like, we all predicted BMW Andretti would do really well from preseason testing, but that didn't turn out like what we expected. So, I don't know. I guess if they get maybe more sponsors in, like someone.
Yeah, and in fact,
they didn't have anyone on their car this year. Sorry to bounce in there, but they didn't have any sponsor. I mean, they did have a few sponsors on their car, but compared to other teams, BMW, the car was full with sponsors, and Neo, I only remember them having Miba, some Chinese, whatever they do, engines, something automotive. And some minor few sponsors, but nothing major, not a title sponsor as you're used to having.
And I think even HWA, which you would think, well, they're only here for one season, they're not going to take it that seriously, but they were plastered in what looked like Chinese sponsors by the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, interesting times, and in fact, we mentioned BMW Andretti. They still haven't confirmed either driver. Alexander Sims is hoping for that phone call. I like Alex. I'd like to see him race next season, but hopefully now he's had a full season in Formula E, he'll improve his consistency as well. Okay, John T. So, star of the season, breakthrough driver of the season, and flop of the season. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's very hard not to pick Jeff for the star, isn't it? You know, after all, he did take the title, but he did have to fight very hard for it. Buemi and Degrassi gave him a really close run right to the end. I've got to say, it was a very, very consistent season for Degrassi, apart from the odd incident. I'm not a massive fan of Degrassi, but he really did keep things up cleaner than he has been previously. Let's put it that way. So that's been good to see, and he certainly made the title fight interesting. So I think I'll pick that as my star.
Yeah, would you say that Degrassi has kind of settled into that role of wily old fox of the grid? He's the kind of now Riccardo Patrese of the grid, isn't he? Who sort of knows how to do things others don't, in a way.
He's certainly got the experience for that, and hopefully he can calm down a little bit more, but not too much, because some people may not like it, but you do need something of a villain in various series to try and keep things a bit more entertaining. And he certainly does that on social media, but that could do with cutting out a little bit. On the track, you see people like afraid of what he might try when he's behind them, and it spices things up wonderfully.
A lot of people are afraid of the term sports entertainment because they're not fans of WWE wrestling, but just how much do you think Formula E is sports entertainment, and should it be ashamed of that fact, or should it celebrate it?
Oh, that's a tricky question, because that ties into, after the final race, we had a lot of backlash certainly on Twitter, from people saying, oh, it's just a crash fest. You know, it's not real racing, and it quite obviously is real racing, because we see fantastic moves and really smart racing as well. You know, the strategies are quite important in Formula E, just as much as in other series. So I think it was a bit unfair for people to just label it a crash fest, but it embraces that. It doesn't try and shun it away like Formula One does, which I think makes a big difference. So yeah, it could well be considered sports entertainment, but it's genuine sports entertainment instead of scripted sports entertainment, drawing the comparisons to WWE.
It's they've almost been blessed in a way that they haven't had to write a script. I mean, there were times in Formula One in the 2000s watching it when you kind of felt that the hand of Bernie was on some of the decisions, but I think the one thing that I have to say for Formula E's race organisers is at no point have I thought, oh, they're bent this way or that way. They're definitely fixing that for that driver. Every steward's decision, I felt, you know, with maybe the exception of Bird in Hong Kong, has been basically fair.
Yeah, pretty much. And if you look at, for example, Mexico or Race 1 in New York, you cannot write that. No one could write what was happening there.
So who do you think is the up-and-comer, and who do you think is the flop of the season?
Up-and-comer, I've been quietly becoming a bit of a fan of Alexander Sims, I must admit. He had a very, very tough middle part of the season, but he started relatively strong, and then towards the end, you've seen him speed up and get a bit more consistency and get a bit more confidence in the car, it seemed like. And I'm very much looking forward to what he does next year. As for flop, it's very difficult to pick, because when So the questions earlier, I was actually thinking of just putting the entire Neo team as the flop. I know they struggled with sponsors and what have you, but it was still a very, very poor performance all across the board.
I sort of feel with Neo, and I do like the team very much. On the 2 races I attended, they were really helpful and nice people, but I feel that it's a little bit like there are these British comedians called Mitchell and Webb, and one of them once described McDonald's as being... they described Ryanair as being McDonald's and EasyJet as being Burger King. They're both as bad as each other, but it's just that Ryanair gets all the flack so EasyJet doesn't have to. I feel like that's the relationship Neo and Dragon have, because Neo gets so much... shade thrown at them really from the fan community. Dragon have been able to get away with some terrible decisions this season.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Dragon have made some very, very poor decisions. I mean, I suppose I was going to give at least one little plus point to Neo. Their car livery. Some people don't like it, but I like these people.
Oh, I love it as well. Yeah.
It's improved so much from whatever it was on the car last season. It does actually stand out from the grid now.
Yeah, very much so, and it's not ridiculously over the top now, which is horrible.
So, Alan, your favourite or best driver of the season? Who do you think is the breakthrough driver, and who do you think is the flop of the season?
So I'm going for the boy from Barnsley, as Jack Nicholls likes to say, Mr. Oliver Rowland. The fact that he's got into the car, last minute after Albon decided to up sticks and go to Toro Rosso, he's taken that car with hardly any running. He's got it in pole position a few times, and apart from battery management issues, I think he could have had a win this season. In regards to flop of the season, it was a toughie. I'm either going for Nelson Piquet Jr. or Felipe Massa.
Controversial.
Felipe Massa. That's such a hot take that I can't put it on my fingers. So what makes you factor Felipe into flop of the season then?
Obviously. It's like when you're on Twitter, everybody's looking at it and they're going, Formula E is not the same class as F1. Get an F1 driver in there and they'll show you how to do it. Stoffel had that, at times this season, but the HWA was just lacking something with the Venturi drivetrain. Felipe Massa's just kind of started off well, but then when he got to the sort of mid to back of the pack, he was busy just basically having his own personal fun fight with Gary Paffett. I know Paffett's a really big fan of him, but yeah, there was just some moves that he did which, I'd expect from a rookie, not from somebody who's had 20 years of F1 driving experience.
Yeah, well, I wonder how much of his early season struggles were just lack of confidence because he'd moved from, of course he had a year out of doing nothing, and then he moved from effectively Formula One with Williams to really a much scrappier race situation. There was the time when he was pushed against the wall like an ice hockey move almost by Roland in Santiago, and so, some of the different qualities of the driving that was needed seemed to knock the stuffing out of him to begin with. Would you agree, Alan?
Yeah, it could be down where it is just a confidence issue with him, but he started off well, but I just felt that as the season went on, it was just more and more sort of desperate moves, and he started off well with, say, a 6th position. He kind of outperformed the quality of the car to begin with. Then, like the rest of the Venturi team, it kind of just went back.
That's true. Eduardo Mortara was my favourite driver of the season. I wouldn't say he was the best driver of the season, but I was really happy to see him outperforming really where people expected Venturi to be at the start of the season. The only issue was, again, the collective fallback, like you said, of the team. I would like to see them all gather something together and use the experience of this season to do better next season. But, of course, we have two other big manufacturers in the sport next season, so it's going to be even harder. We shall have to see what they manage to do. Conrad, star of the season, breakthrough driver of the season, and flop of the season. Who do you think?
My star of the season, that's a tough one, but I reckon it has to go to Jean-Eric Vergne. My reasoning for this is he's managed to do what no one else in the series has done before, not just win 2 Formula E titles, but win them consecutively. And in a series that's notorious for throwing up wildly different results each race, because it's so competitive, this season in particular has been that dial turned up to 11. It's been really, really tough to have a good race and string it together with a few other decent races that either keep you well within the points or give you a gap. And by the last of his victories in Switzerland, he basically had the title shut out. I mean, it was on edge throughout New York, but I felt like this time it wasn't going to slip away. And for that to even be the case, considering how most of the season went, for Jean to be able to pull that out of the bag, and even when he had his early struggles with the package, he kept his head down and managed to win the most races of anyone that season. I think it's incredible that he managed to close it out in the way he did. So I'd have to give it to him.
He's also achieved something else that no other driver's achieved, which is he's been the subject of a 2-part long-form Conrad O'Keefe feature as well.
Yeah, that's certainly so.
Which he screenshotted for his Instagram story, which I thought was tremendous.
Oh yeah, I'm really thankful that he did that. I think I put out a tweet calling him Jepai instead of Senpai in my excitement. Yeah.
Yeah. And how about breakthrough driver and flop of the season?
Breakthrough driver, that's an even tougher one, because my heart wants to give it to Oliver Rowland. Like, as been explained before, he was drafted in short notice. He's managed to extract so much out of that Nissan package, and he's quite unlucky to not be closer to Buemi in the final points table. That's not to take anything away from Buemi, because the late season comeback was incredible, what he managed to do. But yeah, my head is tempted to go with Alexander Sims, who closed out the season in a dramatically good fashion with a pole. And I think he's been incredibly impressive. He's matched Da Costa more times than it'd look like if you looked at the point standings, and he has been bitterly unlucky. I think he's had more qualifying reliability issues than anyone else in the season so far. I mean, finished. That's my head thinking that Formula E is still going on. I think I'm just reluctant to accept that it's gone.
It is hard to let go of.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to let this one swing to Ollie Rowland. The fact that he's a bit younger, a bit less seasoned in motorsport in general, and what he managed to do at such short notice with less preparation, I think I'd have to give him that one.
Good stuff. And how about the flop of the season?
Nelson Piquet Jr. That's the easiest choice I've had to make. Notable mention to Jose Maria Lopez, who I think is a good driver for definite, and I don't think the Dragon environment helped in any way whatsoever, because it's been an absolute disaster class there, that like how to run a team. But he has been incredibly erratic. I still keep forgetting that one race where he crashed on lap 1 and caused that huge pile up.
That was
he was on. Yeah, he was honestly driving like he was under the influence. It was staggering.
Well, in a way, he look. I mean, I've been in jobs that are more stressful than I would have liked in the past, and I feel that maybe in some way by having a demanding boss on Slack who had a 24/7 connection to me through my computer and my phone, that was in some way a small idea of what JML had to cope with Jay Penske on the radio, possibly.
Oh yeah, definitely it won't have helped him at all, but I just feel like a much younger and much fresher Maxi Gunter handled the situation a lot better even when he lost his seat and was reintroduced. That's why, even with the situation at Dragon, I don't think it's boded particularly well for Lopez.
I mean, you're obviously a younger man. We know this, Conrad, than I. So, do you think in some ways being young and having no fear because you're a debutant made it easier for him?
Not necessarily, because there's two types of young people. There's those who get caught like a rabbit in headlights when these opportunities arise or bad circumstances come along, because you start to worry about, can I handle it? Will this ruin my career? Because I imagine that a lot of young drivers are thinking, what will happen 10 to 15 years down the line? And then with the greatest respect to older drivers, they don't have to think about what's necessarily 10 to 15 years down the line. They can think back to the 10, 15 years that they've already done and how that went. And Jose is definitely very experienced. He's been in multiple different series and probably had to face a lot of challenges. At the same time, that makes it sound quite unfair that I'm quite critical of him, because I don't really know the situation. And if it spooked someone as experienced as Jose, it must be an awful situation. But there's no doubt that Maxi's handled it a lot better.
All right, and finally Toby for this round. So, best driver, breakthrough driver, and flop of the season.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with Max Günther being the breakthrough driver of the season. The situation at Dragon this year was just shambolic. When you're traveling to one or two races, you might hear a story or another story about what's going on inside the team. And you have to keep in mind that Max only is 22. And throughout all that process of him losing the seat, then not knowing how his future is going to look like, because you have to keep in mind he left his F2 seat. He quit Formula 2 to race in Formula E, and he might have had a shot down the line at an F1 contract. That's a very bold claim. But he left the step on the ladder right below Formula 1 to race in FE. And then after 3 races, it seemed to be all over. But he kept his head down like a pro, and only being 22 and being able to beat Pacitti by an absolute country mile, that was really impressive. And he, without doubt, is my breakthrough driver of the year. The star of the year, I agree with the argumentation for Jean-Eric Vergne. Jeff had an amazing final 5 races, but just for his consistency, I'm picking Mitch Evans. He only finished 5th in the championship standings, but he was on the podium 3 times. He won in Rome, should have won on other occasions, and he's worked so hard in these last few years with Dragon, and it's so good to see all of that finally paying off. The other star of the year would maybe be Alex Lynn, the other Jaguar driver. I might have a bit of a sweet spot for Jaguar, but Lynn bounced back so quickly. He hasn't been in the car before shakedown in Rome, and of course he had a year in FE under his belt with Virgin in season 4, but then pretty much had to learn the Gen 2 car from scratch, and was really, really quick in adapting to the car. Was in contention for a podium in Berlin and in New York, and he beat Mitch on multiple occasions in these last 5 or 4 races. He was really, really impressive, and he only had 10 points to his name at the end of the season. In my opinion, that should have been much more, and if his consistency creeps back in and maybe the car is a bit more reliable next year, I think we will have to keep an eye out for Alex Lynn.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you would like to support eMotion, you can do so on Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Just go to patreon.com/E_motionFE. There have been people saying he's a stopgap and the driver market's going to be a lot wider next season, but honestly, hasn't he done enough, in your opinion, to justify a seat next season?
He's done enough to justify a seat, yes, but I'm sure there are others who've also justified a seat, who also have given Jaguar reason to at least negotiate with them. I have nothing but my gut feeling as an indicator for him hopefully staying on with the team for next year, because Alex Lynn also is a fantastic development driver, and he's, from what I mean, I've never spoken to him in terms of setup or anything, but from what we hear, Alex Lynn is great at giving feedback for the setup and for developing the car, and he's a great driver in race situations as well. Difficult to tell if he is going to stay with Jaguar, but I can say that I hope for it, and he would deserve another year in Formula E, surely.
Okay. So, I'm going to ask this next question to the people who've attended a race this season, although anybody else can feel free to chime in with opinions and whatever. So, so Toby, Amelia, and I'll jump in at the end. And what we're looking at, Toby, this time is the most enjoyable and or most cringeworthy moment with a driver for you this season. Has there been an awkward media pen moment where you asked the wrong person the wrong question, for example, or has everything gone swimmingly for you with drivers this season?
All the time. I have no idea what I'm doing in the media pen. Literally no idea. I remember a situation in Berlin, I think, after the race. And Jeff won. He was on the podium. He won Monaco and Bern, but he was on the podium in Berlin. And in the press conference, he said that he had problems with his car on Friday, and they discovered it in shakedown and had to repair his car for the Saturday. And I remembered Lotterer struggling on the Saturday, and I asked him whether he had any problems with his car. And then he was quick to correct me on that and say, and he said that he was first in free practice 1 and had a new track record in Berlin, and there weren't any problems whatsoever with his car. And I accused him of maybe having. I gave him the excuse of saying, "Well, I had a problem with my car," but he didn't want to take it. Yeah, that was a bit awkward, and me asking him whether he had a problem with his car when he did a lap which was the new track record that day.
I think there are a few people who are masters of the media pen, and the rest of us are just trying to learn from them, to be honest.
Yeah.
And to be honest, some of the drivers look deeply uncomfortable in that situation as well. Whenever I see Tom Dillman, he wants to kind of hide behind Oliver Turvey, it seems. But yeah, I think different strokes for different folks. So how about Amelia then? So of course, going back to the past, you've interviewed Alain Prost, so you've had some very good encounters with drivers in the past. But how about the current Formula E crop? Who has been your best interviewee? Who's maybe given you a difficult moment at times, if anyone?
I really don't like the media pen. I think it's. I prefer to try and arrange a one-on-one interview if I can, but you know how drivers are; they don't really have time. So I think this season in Hong Kong, I spoke to Andrea Lotterer in the media pen, and he was
him again.
He seemed so bored. I think he's been asked the same question like so many times. He was slurring his words. It was like, oh yeah, the race was, and he had a cup of espresso in his hand, and I almost felt like saying, if you don't want to answer me, it's fine. But then again, Andre does give like really good answers if he's in a good mood. Like if he had a really bad race and then that's the time for you to go straight up to him, then he'll tell you everything. But yeah, Media Pen is not great.
Yeah, he seemed particularly open in the post-race interview after New York Race 2.
Yes.
He walked up to Jack Nicholls and took the mic and started rambling on about the fun room where they have no rules in the Techeetah factory. I thought this could go anywhere. Okay, good. So generally good encounters for you then, except for a few. Just digressing a bit, tell us about Prost. What was he like to talk to?
He was really sweet. It was so long ago. I think this was like 3 years ago, 4. I think it was my first Formula E interview, so it was a bit like I couldn't really believe I was talking to Alan. But yeah, he was really nice. He's a bit taller than me. I thought he was going to be a bit shorter than me.
I think most people think that.
Yeah. And I can't really remember the interview, but it was for Esquire. It was called What I've Learned. So it's basically about his career. It wasn't so much about Formula E. It was like what I've learned from my past.
I mean, as we were talking about Niki Lauda before the podcast, I wonder, did you mention anything about Niki?
No, but I did ask him about. I was referring to Senna, and I asked him, "How do you deal with your enemy?" And he was like, I don't like that word enemy. So, okay.
It was really, obviously it was deeply sad the way it ended, but I feel that when Prost said in an interview, we were just, I feel like he wanted to be my friend. It made me tear up actually, because I thought, imagine if they'd lived and if they could be friends now.
Yeah.
It would have been great.
Exactly.
So I would talk about my most memorable or cringeworthy moment. It wasn't the driver's fault at all, but in Berlin it was my first race, first Formula E race as a spectator. It was my first race full stop as a journalist, and I was just relying on Rob Watts and Hazel Southwell for steers on what to do and where to go. And I went to Media Pen, and due to kind of the path of least resistance and just getting forced to the front, I ended up standing in front of Stoffel Vandoorne with no question. And I'd seen the guy in front of me, after he interviewed him, doing that kind of slightly embarrassing thing that people do when they go to shake somebody's hand and it's kind of like a half high five, half handshake.
Oh. Happens so many times to me. Oh,
I know. I see footballers do this all the time, and it always looks deeply uncool when the wrong person does it. And I was the wrong person, because after asking Stoffel my softball question, my vanilla ice cream question, I tried to do what I saw the other journalists doing, not realising that guy was a friend of Stoffel's, and Stoffel just kind of looks at my limp hand and thinks, okay, well, better not leave him hanging, and sort of does it after a couple of seconds pause. So yeah, that was being left hanging by Stoffel Vandoorne, not his fault, but that was my most cringeworthy moment. Probably the moment that I will save in the memory banks from Media Pen, though, was being absolutely monstered by Lucas di Grassi for apparently getting a fact wrong. I said that Monaco was an energy race, not a crash fest, and of course he had crashed at Monaco, so he was very quick to correct me and said, well, I know about 10 drivers who would argue against that. But he at least tried to answer the question in the end, anyway. So, yes. All right, moving on. So, when watching from home, what was your routine? Did you sit in a darkened room with endless biscuits, or did you watch it on your phone, or did you have a big screen with friends, or did you not have a routine at all? Did it depend on what bar you were in at the time? So let's begin for this one with John T. So whereabouts were you for the races, and what did you do?
My races are always in the living room on the TV. with the wife, because thankfully my wife is a big motorsport fan, has been watching it for a long time. So it makes for a very pleasant atmosphere. Although we usually get invaded by the cat, unfortunately, who just takes turns on whose lap she's going to invade, and it's always when it's hot, never when it's cold. But no, it has to be on the TV. There was a bit of a worry, sort of relatively early in the season, when there was the whole big voltage being dropping out. And it was a case of what's going to be the best format, because as much as they make the effort to put it on, the quality you get from BBC Red Button is horrific. So I'm very, very happy now that they just stream live themselves on YouTube, because the quality is far superior.
So they are actually streaming on YouTube in the UK, are they?
Yes, I've watched all of the races since they started doing that.
Okay.
Quest had stuff as well. Quest had it on HD, so you're comparing the picture between that and the Red Button, and it was just night and day. So it was quite good that they had most of the European rounds on that channel. And it was just basically the Formula E feed that they just piped through.
Yeah, they did. Quest has been showing quite a bit of motorsport recently, which is definitely a move in the right direction. Very happy to see that, because it's the first and last hours of Le Mans as well, which is great.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
it's owned by the Discovery Channel, who own Eurosport, so they get all that cover. So, like, they got the superbikes. I think they got some of the darts if you're into that sort of thing. But yeah, they seem to be doing a lot of live motorsport, which can never be a bad thing. We just need NASCAR to shift across the free tier, and I'll be quite happy.
Yeah.
So you're a fan of NASCAR, Alan?
Yeah, I've been to 2 races. One at Homestead a couple of years ago, and I've been to Sonoma as part of a holiday just around the west coast of America. So, yeah, they know how to put a show on, as they say. It is all geared, a bit like Formula E. That's why I quite like Formula E. It's all about the fan experience. It's all about getting the most out of, your day there. It's not just watching the cars go round and round. You got opportunities to go into the garage, speak to the pit crew, stuff like that. It's brilliant.
Oh, wow. I've always wondered whether NASCAR is actually a spec formula. I mean, it's essentially the big teams will build their own car, won't they? That's right?
Yeah, it's all done within technical guidelines, but so the big teams are supported by Chevy, Toyota and Ford, and then it's just how they utilise the package, and they do sort of bend the rules to the nth degree. Sometimes they get away with it, sometimes they don't. But yeah, it can be a different winner every single week. So that's what, a bit like Formula E, that's what makes it, enjoyable to watch.
And what forms your TV watching routine then, Alan?
Well, mine's is usually it starts off in the morning where I get up, do a bit of social media, for the teams that follow me. I give them the good luck for the day. Usually give Jev or Mitch a fan vote, which I hope they get rid of for next season. And just basically sitting downstairs watching FP1, FP2 on YouTube, watching the quali, and then my wife just comes in for the race, and we usually just spend it shouting at Jack Nicholls and Dario for missing obvious things while the race is going on.
I shouted through the medium of Twitter, which is how everyone shouts these days, at the commentary team. Forgetting, of course, that Bob Varsha actually follows my feed, and then feeling very bashful when it would appear that Jack sort of subtly mentioned the thing I'd been complaining about 10 minutes later. What I was complaining about was drivers speaking in French, and then Jack piping up over the top of their French. I think what they're saying in French might be about strategy. Would you agree, Dario? And of course, neither of them speak the... And I then corrected myself and apologised, because I realised, hang on, the reason Jack does that is because he's a model pro, and he's making sure they're not swearing, because that would be bad for TV, I'm assuming. Would you agree, Alan?
Yeah, well, I mean, they had that scenario where a couple of seasons ago they had there was a lady that used to tweet them the translations of the team radio, because obviously Boemi with the Edam's team, they were fighting for the championship most seasons. So I think, was it Nida? Something like that. She would go on, and literally about 30 seconds after they had the team radio in French, she would automatically translate it, send it on to Jack, and then he was able to relay what they were trying to say, which is good, because I don't speak French, and my German's a bit ropey as well.
But Edams didn't like that, though.
Conrad, what's your TV watching routine? Do you have any biscuits next to you, for example?
Mostly, yeah. I'm usually snacking on something. Yeah, I just tend to watch it on my phone. Half of the races I've either been inside, and then the other half I've been roaming around, like, while I've been walking or travelling to places. But I think I've only watched like 2 on any screen bigger than my phone.
How do you tell an HWA from a Jaguar on your phone?
Oh, I'm so used to that. I use my phone so much now that I'm just perfectly used to the screen, and I can tell the little details.
Okay, and you can tell Stoffel from Gary as well.
That's a little bit harder, but I usually get with it, and the Panasonic branding definitely helps distinguishing the Jaguar. It's hard to miss.
Okay. So, of course, you're the only one of us currently at university, I think, unless I'm missing you out, Toby.
I'm going to uni as well. Yep.
Okay. Is it difficult for you uni guys watching from university? Do you find that you're interrupted by, for example, hallmates or roommates?
For me, surprisingly, no. I usually get a quiet run of it in my room. Which I'm incredibly thankful for, because when I get into the racing mood, I just want to, apart from my social media feeds where I'll obviously update things during the races, I want to shut everything out. That's my me time. And yeah, I get a lot of peace and quiet during those times.
Okay, good stuff. So, Amelia, what's your TV watching routine? Do you have one? Is there a plate of biscuits or a plate of something else in front of you?
Usually it's me in my room with my laptop, sometimes alone, sometimes with my cat, and usually it comes with a variety of chocolates and crits, not so much biscuits, and a cup of tea, and I'll have my notebook with me to take down notes. Yeah, but mostly because we don't get the live feed here, so I just watch it on Facebook.
I must admit I have quite a sort of I have a diet motivated by guilt, shall we say? So most of the time I don't allow myself to eat biscuits and crisps, but then Formula E, the floodgates open. I take that as the excuse to do so.
Yeah, I use that as an excuse too.
To be fair, my guilt's usually motivated by the
diet. So it's the opposite then. Okay. Toby, do you have any particular routine, or are you out and about when you watch a race?
No, I'm home as well, sitting in front of 2 computers, because I usually do live coverage for eFormel.de. And that means I have my laptop open with the live timing and sometimes Twitter, and on my normal desktop screen I have on the right hand side the live coverage, backhand stuff, the place where you fill in the words, and on the left-hand side I have the TV image. It's on Eurosport in Germany. Sometimes, oh no, not sometimes, but usually this season they started showing the races on the German version of the BBC. So we have two versions, ARD and ZDF, and these two broadcasters do show FE in a live stream online, and some selected races in their normal TV feed as well and program as well. So yeah, that's my setup: a laptop and a desktop PC, and all in all, maybe 3 screens, 4 screens, depends on it. And that's what I do for each and every session, which is fun, but I don't really enjoy the races in the way you would think of enjoying a thing.
I think we're the two people who. I think we're the two people who cover it live as live tweeters or live bloggers, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I find that you miss crucial bits. Not you, but one misses crucial parts of action sometimes by trying to find the wittiest possible tweet to describe the previous piece of action. So during New York Race 1, I just essentially, it was like the meme. I pushed everything off the desk. I thought, let's just watch the race. If anything truly significant happens, I'll mention it. Is that how you feel about some races, do you think, Toby?
I feel like I miss out on a lot of things as well. The first reason being that I have to type and that I can't talk. And that's the big advantage TV commentators have. They can talk and use spoken language and words. Meanwhile, us writers, we can only type these words in, and that just takes a lot more time, which means that you're focusing on what you're typing, because you don't want to have any grammar mistakes in or do any typos or whatever you could do with the language. The focus isn't as much on the action on track, but it's kind of divided in between the action on track and the work.
Yeah. All right, good. So let's move on to our penultimate question, which will be, what will you be filling your time and attention with in the off season? It's a very short off season, and I would imagine probably some people are thinking about Valencia testing already. But how are you filling the gaping hole in your time and heart that comes when Formula E goes away? Let's begin with Conrad. What are you doing?
Work, and lots of work. That's basically what I'm doing for the next few weeks or couple of months at least. But after that, probably just fill it with as many other racing series as I can. I also have Formula One, which interests me a lot. Super Formula, which I've occasionally written about and would love to do so on a much more regular basis. Outside of motorsports, I'm not really sure. The Premier League season will be back. Well, in football in general, will be back for 2019-20, so that'll be able to fill up some time as well.
Yeah, it's sometimes it sometimes knocks me back how quickly football comes along after Formula E finishes. It feels like there should be a mandatory break of 2 months between each sport, doesn't it?
I'm kind of grateful that they pick up within 3 weeks of each other, so then I can't get bored for too long.
Okay, good stuff. Amelia, over there in Kuala Lumpur, I imagine there's an awful lot to do anyway, but what fills your time when you're not watching Formula E?
Just go on YouTube, really. Just fall into the rabbit hole and just start watching one video after another. But so, I mean... Mm-hmm.
Which videos fill your attention? Is it racing videos or something else?
Sometimes it's racing videos. Sometimes I watch a bit of F1 when Formula E isn't on. But we're still working on quite a lot of off-season content for eracing.net, so it's never ending, really.
Yeah, so actually, what's coming up on eracing.net? Are there any specific features that we can look forward to in the coming week or so?
Maybe not in the coming week, but just in between testing and now, maybe more behind the scenes stuff, like the one we recently did with Brembo Bricks. So maybe more on interviews with engineers or team personnel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look forward to that anyway. And okay, so Jonty, I know you're very busy with F1 Word and Chain Bear as well, but so you've got plenty of F1 activities. But is there anything non-racing related that you fill your time with when no racing is on?
Well, lots of work. I think that's the same for all of us. I do play a lot of games, but not just video games. I do a lot of board games. Get friends over that live in Donington conveniently. A lot of that, the stuff that goes quite in depth on, you'll see reviews on sites like Board Game Geek and whatnot. I think that can get very, very competitive.
Oh, board games! I thought you meant video games.
No,
Right.
I do a lot of video games, but definitely a lot of board games.
So tell me which board games are the ones that we should look out for, the most compelling games right now.
Oh, right. Well, for a party atmosphere, you can't go wrong with something like Sheriff of Nottingham, which can just get hilarious because it's all based on who can swindle the other. If there's just two of you, top of the list is always Twilight Struggle, based on the Cold War, and it is just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I've played it with one friend 50, 60, 70 times now, and it's different every single time.
Well, that sounds wonderful. Is anyone else on the pod a board game fan?
Not so much, no. I mean, it's okay, but I'm not the biggest of board game fans, no.
I
Sorry.
find that board games are a bit like a bit like a movie I don't expect to enjoy but do. There are games that suck me in. I don't know, Jonty, if you've ever played a game called Eclipse, but I was at a board game camp last November, which I was taken to by my friends who are big board gamers, and I played Eclipse once before in a kind of truncated game in their kitchen, but this was a 9-hour marathon, and honestly, best board game I've ever played out of not very many.
Yeah, Eclipse is a classic. It always rates very highly on people's lists of top 10s of games. And like you say, it's one that can go on for a very, very long time. If it's particularly well-skilled players, I've seen it last for days.
I think we're still waiting for the great motorsport strategy board game, aren't we?
No, there is one called Formula D, which is...
Seriously?
Yes. It's got a few expansions with different tracks. I think the original one is Monaco, and it is absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
So how do you play it?
It's a lot about strategy. It's been quite a while since I've played it, I must admit. But it's all a case of how the cards come and how you play things. It can get quite in-depth considering it's just about trying to get the cards around the board. A lot of odd things can happen, as happens with a lot of these board games.
So, Alan, what is your off-season what is your off-season routine? What do you fill your time with when you're not watching racing at the weekend?
Well, that's a good question. I like sort of going out and flying with my drones. I've got a DJI Spark, so it's nice just to get away. And there's a couple of places where there's just some fields, obviously, obeying the law in regards to drone flying. Make sure there's nobody around you. You can just get some great views, especially from where I live. You can see the Forth bridges. So you've got the rail bridge, the old Forth Road Bridge, and the Queen's Ferry crossing. So yeah, it's great because you can just get the drone up and then just get, the pictures of the bridge, and it's just great. You can just see so many different things up there than you can down on the ground. So yeah, that's what I tend to do, out with obviously driving in my electric car.
How skilled do you have to be to pilot a drone with confidence over the Forth?
I don't get as far as going to the forfeit itself. I'm probably about 5 miles away, and sort of send the drone about half a mile away. But with the DJI ones, compared to the cheap ones that you can buy on Amazon and stuff, the control is just effortless. You just got remote, and if you tell it to go up, it goes up. If there's a bit of wind, it stabilizes it. So, yeah, it's great fun.
Well, great stuff. And I heard a murmur of approval from Toby. We're about to come to you anyway, but do you have a drone, and what other activities do you fill the off-season with?
I don't have a drone, but I always wanted one. I think flying drones are super duper cool, and I always enjoyed aviation, and that kind of is related to aviation, I would say. Always wanted one, but don't have one as of now, sadly.
Do it.
If I have the money for it, I might get one. Yeah, it's.
I got
something.
one off. Yeah, sorry to interrupt there, Toby. I got mine's off eBay. It was a refurbed one, so instead of spending £600, it cost me £300. I know that's still quite a lot, but you do get a lot of bang for your buck with that.
I'll keep that in mind. Sounds interesting, yeah. So I might pick up drone flying in the off season, but apart from that, I'm still going to uni, of course, and there are exams coming up. That's what I'm filling my first couple of weeks of the off season with. But in August, I'll be all done with this first year of uni for me, and then I'll probably. Yeah, go home to my family, because I'm studying in another town in Germany, and I might visit them. There's still, I'm planning on going to a race at the Nürburgring. I'll be near Hockenheim this weekend, not for the race, but for activities with partners of Formula E and Formula 1 teams. So that's the plan for the immediate future. Apart from that, I have no idea what I'm filling my off season with. I'm probably just going to be sitting here twiddling my thumbs.
I've got to admit, the inner schoolboy within me did raise my ears when you said I will be around Hockenheim for activities with partners. But then you said something else afterwards and took me out of the moment. Anyway. So, with partners of Formula E teams, is that for eformal.de? Can we expect an article about it soon?
Yeah, I'm planning on writing a feature about it. It's Acronis. Listeners might not know this, but Stuart and I, we've been to an Acronis event in Berlin, and that's kind of part 2. They're partnering with 2 F1 teams, and they've invited me for an interview with one of their strategy officers, I think. So someone of the higher ups at Acronis, and I'm planning on writing a story, maybe comparing F1 and FE in terms of what they're doing in cybersecurity and what it all means. What it actually means, cybersecurity in motorsports.
Well, that sounds tremendous, and I've got to say, completely unsponsored, Acronis were very kind to everybody who attended that event. I think, Toby, you said Berlin was the most special race for you. It was my first, so it's always going to have a soft place in my heart, but I found that because it was anomalous in the way that it was a 2-day Formula E weekend, it meant that there were events in the evening that you could go to and enjoy, and everybody sort of hung around the track or went to hotels near the track, and it kind of became a party atmosphere if you were at the race, I thought, over that evening, so it was nice.
Absolutely, yep. And it's always like that. The atmosphere around races is always good, and there's always something to do. And if there's no event by any of the team sponsors, you just hang out with your colleagues and go out for drinks with other journalists. It's very nice in the FE paddock, I have to say, and it's a big privilege as well. And I mean, I've been talking about how cool it is being in FE and all of that in this episode, but of course I know how big of a privilege that is. And yeah.
Yeah.
So, final question as we go around the table, and this is moving slightly away from Formula E, but I was interested by the launch of the Extreme E car, and also by the fact that Sébastien Ogier, the current GOAT of world rallying, if you ignore Sebastian Loeb, is joining Extreme E as an advisor and as an ambassador. Obviously, in our wildest fantasies, we hope he will drive there. Maybe it'll happen, but let's go around the table, beginning with Conrad. Do you have any feelings about Extreme E, positive or negative? And also, are there any road electric vehicles that have caught your attention or that seem particularly awesome to you?
I think Extreme E will definitely be enjoyable. I look a lot forward to it. It reminds me of. It's hard to say. Do you remember the old Dakar cars of the 90s? And they were quite experimental. They were kind of like half Pikes Peak machines. Extreme E kind of reminds me of pushing those boundaries in a similar way, and it's a real throwback, and I can't wait to see how the series fares. I hope it fares well, because electric representation is definitely needed, even with Formula E around.
They were my favourite cars for a long time. I loved the what was it? Citroen ZX Rally Raid. That was a beautiful car.
Yeah, it was an amazing car.
I wonder, Toby, if you feel that Extreme E is actually part of the problem, in that it's going to threatened regions of the world, and it's okay. All the journalists and reporters and camera crews will stay on a boat, I think, away from the region. But is it better in some ways if we don't go there and raise awareness to these problems, and if we just talk about them rather than going to them? I mean, what's your opinion?
Difficult question. I think we'll have to wait and see how they actually do their season, and how their actual plan on and their intentions are on the administrative side of things. The idea does sound a bit meh, because you are going to endangered places on Earth, and of course, raising awareness for these issues and the consequences of climate change is important, and it's a very good idea theoretically to talk about them and to just show the impact of climate change. I don't feel, just from the idea, like it's really necessary to further disrupt and further maybe destroy these endangered areas on this planet. But we'll have to wait and see, I think, about how they are actually going about their races and their rally stages and their organization of these events.
Jonty, do you have any opinion on the EVs on the road and also on Extreme E?
Yeah, I mean, following on from what Toby was saying on going to these regions, I think sometimes I can be quite pessimistic or cynical, because, as he says, it's important to raise awareness of these areas. But part of me also worries that you will have the very big, less than savoury corporations who are behind a lot of the threat to these areas, thinking, "Oh, look at all that lovely resource that we haven't yet plundered." And I do worry about things like that quite a bit, unfortunately. And also on the Extreme E cars, I did actually catch myself critiquing them when they were showing the images of them being made. They had tweeted out pictures of the roll cages being put together, and I was picking faults within the welds, thinking that could break. And that's actually genuine concern. I really wasn't sure whether I should say anything or not, because there are genuine faults within the welds of those roll cages, which in a severe incident, and we do see some very big incidents in off-road racing, that could fail. And I don't know what to do about that, to be quite honest. I don't know if any of you know the people in charge.
I think probably a couple of people here at least have Alejandro's email address. I don't personally, but we can maybe get that afterwards. But I mean, tell me more about the problems with the roll cage. He says adopting the Gene Wilder pose from the meme. What is it that's wrong with it, in your opinion?
It's just analysing the actual welds themselves. There's certain elements you get within welds called the cold lap and undercut. These are issues that arise when the weld's not been laid quite correctly, and it takes too much of the parent material or too little, and it can lead to small cracks, which could open up. I'm certain they won't, but it's entirely possible that they, it's unlikely but possible, and it's just part of my job that I have to spot these things and think, no, I've just got to do something about that. Maybe it comes from a friend who was my mentor and trainer who wouldn't allow anything to go through that wasn't perfect.
Well, in fact, your industrial experience was useful during New York qualifying practice one rather, which had to be postponed due to, or had to be cancelled actually, red flagged, due to a loose drain cover. And you gave my Twitter audience a very comprehensive explanation of why drain covers so often fail on street circuits, which I was pleased about.
Yes, cast materials can be a nightmare, and in all regards of working with metals. If you're having to weld them, machine them, anything, cast materials are a disaster. But as for EVs on the road, I've got to say I'm very excited about Honda's new E prototype, because I think this is a massive issue with EVs at the moment. There's so much effort being put into the electric hypercars and the super clever, luxurious cars such as Teslas. It's supposed to be a car for people, but it's still over £100,000. There needs to be a small city car where it's very, very simple and basic, and it's just range 400 miles, doesn't do any more than 50 miles an hour. You can get luggage in the front and the back, and it'll cost you 30 grand. That will make the EV market explode.
Well, I want to ask Amelia this one, because I have no idea how many people live in your city, but I've heard that the traffic levels can be quite challenging at times.
Yeah.
So how much of a difference would a more progressive policy on EVs make to your city?
At the moment, I've never actually seen a fully electric car on the road before here in KL, but I've seen like charging stations and stuff. I'm not sure if it could actually work in in Southeast Asia cities, just because the traffic system it's always going to be congested. So even with electric vehicles, I don't know if it could actually, if you're going to be stuck in gridlock traffic, will you have enough battery to get you home? Because the amount of cars is not going to change on the roads anytime soon.
And do you not feel that the concerns over range anxiety are a bit overplayed? Because as somebody said a while back, it's very rare that you'll need to drive 250 kilometers at one time.
Yeah, I think that is a main concern for people here. They just seem to think that EVs won't be able to take them from work to home because of the they think there's a limited range to them. So I think that's a common misconception, maybe.
And actually, of course, the thing I forget is that just because a car says it'll do 220 kilometres, that is the optimal range, isn't it? If you're driving it exactly how the manufacturer wants you to.
Exactly.
So I actually was driving a hired Leaf the other week and tried to do that because it was running low on battery. I had to stop and charge in the end because it wasn't good enough. But I tried to do. I thought, okay, let's use your Formula E experience here. Lift and coast. Drive as slowly as possible on the straights and try and get some regen down the hills. It worked okay, but I was still wasting battery somehow.
Yeah, and you just get that feeling of anxiety. It's not fun.
Well, it depends what sort of a person you are. I live in a world of anxiety, so I have to make it fun somehow. Okay, so that's good stuff. Alan, you live in Edinburgh, is that right?
Dunfermline, which is just about 10 miles north. I am originally from Edinburgh.
It shows my Scottish geography, because Edinburgh's
okay.
nowhere near the Forth Bridge, of course. But
Well, it is.
okay.
It is.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll edit that stupidity out later. But you're probably the most on brand of any of us in terms of talking about your EV usage, and in fact, you set up a whole YouTube channel about it. So, what is the fascination for you in electric vehicles, and why do you want to evangelize, and why do you want to tell people about it and not just drive it privately?
Yeah, it's. I was just interested in the technology part of it, how just a normal, almost like a mobile phone or a laptop battery can produce power that can propel a car in near silence for 100, 150 miles, which for me, I travel daily 34 miles a day. It's all this range anxiety and stuff. It's going to be a change of mindset where people at the moment look at a car. If it's unleaded, it does 400 miles. If it's a diesel, it does 600 miles. But how many people actually drive 400 miles or 600 miles in one go? So it's a mindset of just, which could be a separate podcast in itself, I have to admit, Stuart, where I could burst all the myths about driving an electric car. It just works. It saves money, and once you've driven one and you can feel the torque and acceleration, which you would have experienced in a Leaf, you just can't go back to an internal combustion engine car. They're too slow. Too noisy.
I can imagine that's the case, and in fact, I'm going to ask you if you'd like to come on a podcast later this summer, because I think there are podcasts where we focus on the racing, like this one, and then there are more techie focused ones, and I'd love to get you on a techie one if I can.
Of course, yeah.
Cool. And also Extreme E. Have you seen the car? Do you have an opinion on it, Alan?
I've only seen the tweets, and obviously just went in and followed it. There's a friend of mine who you might know on Twitter, guys, Chris Ramsey, who's of Plug-in Adventure. He seems to be quite excited about this because he's done the Mongo Rally last year in a 30 kilowatt Leaf, and he did that over several days. And it seems to be, if it's pitched right and there is an educational piece and it does get picked up, it could be a good thing. But as discussed with earlier, it's one of those where it has to be done in the right way. If it doesn't, then, it will be a mitigated disaster.
Okay. So just to conclude this podcast, and thank you all ever so much for coming on, I'm going to go round the table one last time and ask you to tell everyone your social media handles and how they can find you, and also if you have articles coming out or videos coming out or any other content, where can they find you and what will it be? So let's begin with Amelia first of all.
Well, my Twitter is at Amelia Hilda, that's AMYLIAHILDA, and I write for eracing.net, and we will have a couple of off-season content coming up soon, so stay tuned to that.
Okay, and Conrad?
My Twitter handle is O'Keefe_92. You'll find some interesting content on there, and hopefully find some much better content on eracing.net in the next few weeks.
Jolly good. Are you keeping it under wraps?
I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do yet, but I'm one of those types that can write something up in a few hours on the fly if I've got inspiration, so who knows?
Ah, natural writer. I like it. Okay, Toby, what have you got cooking at the moment?
The Acronis piece. And apart from that, I'll have to wait and see. But I don't have to wait and see. I know what's coming, but I can't really talk about too much. Little tease, if you're interested in what I'm doing, or my lovely colleagues at eFormal.de are doing, read what we're doing. It's in German, but it's easy to translate, and Google does that for you automatically nowadays, doesn't it? So I will share the most interesting eFormal.de stories on my Twitter account. Let's just put it this way. I'll keep an eye out for the interesting stuff on eFormal.de, and you keep an eye out for my Twitter account at Toby Tweetings. This is where I do all of my Twitter stuff. Simple as that.
Good Lord, you're so professional. Okay. So, Alan, are you making any YouTube content right now, and how can we find you on social media?
Not at the moment. I haven't made anything in 18 months, but the plan is to start doing that again. My Twitter handle is at Scottish EV Owner. That's all one word, and it's the same. If you want to search out on YouTube, just go Scottish EV Owner. There's reviews of different electric cars. There's a small piece on Formula E, and there will be more stuff coming soon. So watch this space.
And Jonty, I know you're on many shows, so tell us where we can find you, and also how we can write to you if we want.
Yes, well, you'll find me on Twitter at Jonty's_corner. Hopefully dropping out some of the silliness, because I seem to get far too involved with the jokes that are going around. Also, after every Formula One race, I will be live with Sean on the F1 Word on YouTube, as we always do for a good, what we call an F1 Word hour, which is any length of time except 60 minutes. And I'm trying to get my own YouTube channel back and going. Like, I've done nothing for 18 months, but I have a few days off work now, which will get all the backdrop sorted and hopefully start producing things properly again.
And we're going to have Sean on a future podcast. In fact, I'm even thinking about just having a one-to-one with him, where I talk to him about setting up the F1 Word and about his following and stuff. But I'm wondering, what do you think? Because it's a very simple show. It's 2, maybe 3 people talking about F1 with occasionally the odd image on the screen. What is it that makes it so compelling, in your opinion, to so many people?
I think the main compelling thing about Sean's channel is how he started it, because none of his friends and family are into motorsport. He wanted somewhere to talk to people and rant and rave about the things that go on in races. So he thought, what strangers on the internet? That makes perfect sense. And it did. People liked what he was doing, and it's very much his opinionated pieces that people come to the channel for. And they stayed, which made him just go live on Sundays after the race and bring more people in. It was because of my job that I got involved with it, because I have knowledge of how much certain things cost. We were discussing the chances of dropping costs in Formula One and what could be done.
So pleased, by the way, to pass 300 followers this week. It's astonishing to me how many people have come to this podcast and come to my Twitter and come to the posts, considering I had literally 6 followers going into the Algeria race, and one of them was a bot. So to get from there to this, I mean, it's by no means F1 Word or eRacing.net numbers, but I'm so pleased and so grateful to everyone listening to this. So thank you to everyone for coming on, and a very good evening or good night to you wherever you are. Okay, bye.